And welcome back to Capitol Tonight one final time. It's been just 24 hours since the polls closed. Just 24 hours, I don't know. And there's a lot to talk about with our next guests. They're the insiders, veterans of the political scene who've seen their fair share of elections. Joining us tonight is Dave Catalfamo, former communications director to former Governor George Pataki, now a partner at Capitol Public Strategies. And across the table from him is Steve Greenberg, former communications director to 2 assembly speakers and now a pollster for Siena College. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I know we're all a little bit exhausted and punchy today, but I appreciate your time coming in.
Happy to be with you.
Now, Steve, since your party was the victor, we're going to have to go to you first.
I have no party.
Well, since the Democrats were able to sweep the statewide ticket, what did you think of the election last night?
Well, they were certainly, they played out as expected at the top of the ticket, certainly. You know, Siena had said that Andrew Cuomo was ahead by 25 points on the Sunday before Election Day, and we saw him win by 28 points. Certainly no surprises with Senator Schumer or Gillibrand. We thought that the attorney generals and controllers races were going to be tight. Certainly the controllers race was tight. To me, one of the fascinating things is I've never been a big believer, Dave, in coattails, but I think what we saw yesterday was Cuomo coattails, because for the 2 days, Sunday and Monday leading into Election Day, Andrew Cuomo put his arms around Eric Schneiderman, embraced him and said, you have to vote for Schneiderman for Attorney General. You got to vote for Schneiderman. They appeared together like 10 times. Schneiderman wins by 11. He ignored DiNapoli, refused to endorse DiNapoli. DiNapoli barely wins. He gets 50% of the vote. Harry Wilson comes within 3 points of winning. I think that's purely Andrew Cuomo.
I don't know. I think it might be Palladino implosion. I mean, more dragging down the ticket than Andrew pulled the other up.
But I would have thought you would have seen that with both of them then.
Yeah, well, I mean, 2 things, and you know, it's interesting to watch because Donovan obviously had, you know, didn't have an independent line, but he was ethnic and would appeal to Italian Catholics, with a big voting group in the state, whereas Wilson was not ethnic and had the independence line. I think, candidly, Wilson ran a better campaign, a lot better campaign, spent more money, ran a more aggressive campaign. I don't know what campaign the Donovan campaign was running. I mean, I think that they were looking to run and be Attorney General for New York City, and I think that showed in the final poll. So and frankly, Carl Palladino hurt the entire ticket. Simple. In a wave election, he managed to depress the entire ticket. Absolutely.
Steve, you're not in your head to that.
Oh yeah, he was a flawed candidate and a worse campaign, and it's reflected in the numbers.
Yep.
Do you think that's what people were talking about over at the Republican side, that Carl Palladino was dragging them down?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Palladino campaign, it didn't carry over Jack Quinn in Buffalo, which a lot of people thought, including myself, that would happen.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
You know, that was a surprise. And candidly, I mean, another thing that was going on, and I don't think we understand it yet, is that we had, for the first time, the ballot completely in front of us, and it allowed for ticket splitting, I think, in a way that we've never seen or understood before. And you're able to look at the whole ballot and go A, B, C, D, and obviously people did. I mean, how does Harry get another 250,000 more votes than Palladino does, who's on the top of the ticket? It's crazy.
And I think we've always had ticket splitters. I mean, I think New York State is like 35 to 40% of New Yorkers automatically vote Democrat from top of the ticket all the way across, with exceptions. I think there's about 25 to 30% of New Yorkers who do the same on the Republican line, and it's those other people. It's that other 30, 35, 40% of New Yorkers who are the swing voters who decide elections. And I think we saw more of that yesterday than we normally do. I mean, look at the Republican.
Very smart.
Well, I mean, the Republicans won at least 5 of the congressional seats in New York.
Heading towards 6.
Maybe heading towards 6, They won several Senate districts that they weren't expected to win, lost a couple that they were expected to win. So, I mean, I think we saw voters going all across the board. I mean, you were just with Assembly Minority Leader Kolb. They picked up a bunch of, Republicans picked up a bunch of Assembly seats. So, despite the Republican tsunami nationally, but the Democratic tsunami at the top of the ticket, we saw all kinds of things below the radar in terms of local races and legislative races across the state.
But I'm going to stay with that. Palladino ground down the wave. And I would actually say that but for the wave, I bet Palladino probably would have been more like 25, 22. I mean, I honestly believe that he legitimately ground down Republican energy in such a way that was really damaging.
We do have to point out, even the day after the primary I talked to you, Dave, and you
Mm-hmm.
said you were still a Rick Lazio guy.
Yep.
How do you think this election would have looked different if he had won the primary?
Rick Lazio would have topped 40, I think. I mean, or got to 40, and if he got to 40, I'm positive Harry would be the controller, and Danny would have been a lot closer.
That's possible, although, you know, Rick never showed the ability to raise money in the primary.
Right.
Would he have been a Donovan-like campaign? In the general, we'll never know.
But he would have ridden the wave.
Right.
It would have collapsed because of the wave, and then the wave would have brought money, and it would have been a closing as opposed to a
scuba gear here. We're talking about these waves and tsunamis all over the place.
But talking of the surfboard, if I'm not mistaken, and I mean obviously we have to wait till final numbers are in from the board, but it looked to me, based on the numbers that I was seeing this afternoon, that it looks like turnout was low, even by gubernatorial years. The last 3 gubernatorial elections, turnouts averaged about 46%. I don't think it got above 41, 42% this year, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and 2 things there. One, Democrats weren't inspired to turn out, and obviously we'll see where the turnout came from. And then, again, back to Palladino. I think he ground down Republican enthusiasm.
Well, kind of switching gears here from the governor's race back to the state Senate. That we're still waiting to see how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, I mean, right now, as best I understand it, we have 30 guaranteed Republican senators, 29 guaranteed Democratic senators, and 3 Senate seats still being contested, all Democratic incumbent senators. I think I think it's very difficult to think that the Democrats are going to hold on to control of the Senate because they have to have a clean sweep of the 3. I mean, if the Republicans pick up 1, that is my world's worst nightmare, that we wind up at 31, 31.
Don't even say it. Don't even say it.
But I mean, it's certainly not inconceivable at this point, or 32-30 Republican.
I think they get them all. I
think Republicans get them all?
I do.
Super optimistic. Dave, do explain.
No, I think, well, for whatever, we were talking about this in the room, for whatever bizarre reason, Westchester stopped counting at 80%, so there's still 20% of the district out. And I do think that Cohen will make up some vote when they finish the count. And then the absentees, I do think, will break Bob's way. And I think because of that, I think it will close when they finish the count. And I think he'll take it in the final tally.
That may happen, or it may go the other way. And in the Nassau seat, they're only, Craig Johnson's down by, I think, about 415 votes or so. A lot of paper there.
Right.
I mean, who knows which way this is going to go.
Yeah.
It's going to be...
It's fun.
But the problem is, we're not going to know now, probably, I heard Liz's interview earlier with Senator Kruger. We're probably not going to know for a few weeks. But you know what? 2 years ago, go back 2 years in time, we were at the same place. We had a number of still contested seats after the election. Right. We didn't know that the Democrats had won control right after election.
Yeah. And 2 years before that with Nick Spano.
That's right.
And we waited forever for that to go.
So, and when did Frank Padovan get sworn in 2 years ago? Wasn't it like January or February?
Yeah.
Well, I think Liz actually raised a really interesting point in her interview with Senator Kruger, saying, well, come January, we still don't know the outcomes of this race. What happens if it's still up in the air?
Good question.
From the public's perspective, dysfunction just continues. Nothing new. I mean, I think the public is hoping that things are going to change, whether the Democrats hold on to control or the Republicans take it. I think they're hopeful, new governor, new era, let's get rid of the dysfunction. But if they see it continue, I don't think it'll shock the voters of the state.
But, I mean, fortunately, there's not a whole lot that goes on in January. I mean, it's really more on the executive side to have the state of the state and introduce the budget. So they're really more in an organizing, reacting mode than they are.
But Caitlin and her colleagues will be reporting on it every day.
Every single day.
Caitlin will be tweeting it constantly.
I will be, yeah. Dexterous thumbs. But now, Dave, if the Republicans do take control of the Senate, do you think Andrew Cuomo works well with the Senate majority if it's Republican?
I think Andrew Cuomo wants to be president of the United States, so I think he is going to govern in a very centrist sort of way. Now, the question really is whether or not he can govern in a centrist sort of way and allow the Republicans a place to be that allows them to actually move him move him in a way that actually they could have a positive relationship with him, or be co-opted in a way a la Ralph Moreno and Mario Cuomo, which was very deleterious to the state. So really, I mean, I think that they're going to have their interests more aligned, and I do think that Governor-elect Cuomo is going to govern in a very centrist sort of way. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for them to work together, and I think he's probably the happiest person in the state if the Republicans were to take the Senate.
Well, beyond philosophy and beyond center, left, right, and beyond whether the governor-elect has presidential aspirations, I think the one thing we know is that Andrew Cuomo wants to succeed in this job. He wants to be able to say, I turned New York around. Sure. Under the Cuomo II administration, we were successful. He knows in order to do that, he needs the legislature. And I think Andrew Cuomo is smart enough to have learned the lesson of Eliot Spitzer 4 years ago, who won the largest gubernatorial landslide ever, comes into office with a nearly 80% favorability rating, and wasted it away within a month, picking a fight with Shelley Silver and the Democrats in the Assembly, picking a fight with Joe Bruno and the Republicans in the Senate. He then was never able to get anything done in the legislature. I think Andrew knows that he has a carrot and a stick. What's going to be fascinating to watch is how he balances that, because he's got to push the legislature to do what he wants. Right. Governor Pataki did that certainly in his first term. But how do you push them without bullying them? Right. He doesn't want to be the effing steamroller that Eliot Spitzer was.
Yep. But I do think, and again, I think when we talk about this during the session usually, it's institutional almost more than it's political, from the point of view of how do you get something done. And again, I think a governor coming in his first term with a massive deficit and with voters clearly tired of taxes and whatnot, his agenda, in all likelihood, according to what he's put out, is going to be more aligned with the Senate Republicans. Policies matter, and again, I think also they matter to the Senate Republicans, who are trying to look a little bit different than they did the last time that they had power. So it's kind of going to be an interesting sort of dance to find, the center right or the center in New York, because clearly the other thing we could take from this election, you cannot be a right candidate in the state of New York, a hard right candidate, and have a prayer. Well, I mean, and Carl Palladino was hard right and nutty. I'll say it.
Loose cannon, I think, is the term. Yeah. The other factor in all of this, and you and I were talking about this earlier as well, is once we know that the 3 Senate elections are done, whoever wins them, can we get on with governing for the next little while? If there's a special election, fine, fight it out. But we had this campaign. We used to have this back in the old days when, Warren Anderson and Hugh Carey and Stanley Fink. Let's get to governing. Let's get the Democrats together, the Republicans together. Let's figure out a way to disagree. I mean, we don't have to co-opt each other on policy, but let's find a way to work together and govern and not make everybody look foolish.
Dave, last word quickly?
Last word quickly. The next big question is the future of the Republican Party in the state of New York and what that leadership looks like, because I think, like the Dallas Cowboys, we need to make coaching change. So.
Oh, it might be a big makeover, but that is our show for tonight.